a concern. And still, even today, this is a concern. We have to take a look at what Brzezinski wrote in that book. Later, as I studied technocracy, by the way, I got to thinking maybe the word technocracy and technotronic are related. Maybe technotronic is just a synonym or something for technocracy. I went back and I read Brzezinski's book again, cover to cover, kind of lined up the themes and the thought patterns and stuff, the doctrines he was proposing. And by the time I was reading the book, I said, you can't call this plagiarism, but it was pure unadulterated technocracy from the 1930s. Mm-hmm. And guess where Brzezinski was a professor when he got tapped by Rockefeller? Columbia University.
Yes. Oh, boy.
Coincidence?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. So Brzezinski set the course with this book, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. And we've got to understand this book if we're going to understand what's going on today. Brzezinski he defined in his book several stages of societal development. There was first the religious stage that he basically characterized as narrow-minded, and basically it was massive ignorance. He had a very dim view of the religious world that preceded all this stuff. Then there was the era of nationalism, where there was some sense of equality before the law as far as nations were concerned. That gave way to a stage of Marxism. And Brzezinski was not a Marxist, as he has been unfairly called a Marxist for many years. He was not a Marxist. I will stand on that today, and I can prove it, because he says in his book that Marxism represents a further vital and creative stage in the maturing of man's universal vision, close quote. He was not proposing Marxism, but he said it was a necessary stepping stone to get to the final stage, which is his technotronic era. That's what the book's about. So he writes about the technotronic era, that it's rational humanism on a global scale, and he called it the result of American communist evolutionary transformations. Oh, geez, there's that word again.
The result of American communist evolutionary transformations. Let's just chew on that one for a few seconds. Well, that lends credence to what Charlotte Iserbyt was saying about how Ronald Reagan had merged the educational systems of he and Gorbachev. We're merging the educational protocols between the former Soviet Union and the United States.
Yes.
I don't coincidence again.
Just no. Charlotte has it right. And education is a key part of technocracy, by the way. They have a complete agenda for education, and it is exactly what Charlotte has seen over the last 30 years, 40 years. So it's the result of American communist evolutionary transformation, but it is not American democracy or republic. It is not communist, Marxist communism. It's a new thing. It's literally a new thing that has not been seen on the face of the planet yet, but Brzezinski predicted is coming, and we need Marxism to help us get there, but at some point, Marxism is going to be completely dumped, and technocracy, or the technotronic era, will take over. So this was his book. Well, Brzezinski had a very dim view of a lot of things. Americans get upset, for instance, at a quote like this that he wrote in his book. Again, remember, it's 1970. He wrote, quote, "The nation state, as a fundamental unit of man's organized life, has ceased to be the principal creative force. International banks and multinational corporations are acting and planning in terms that are far in advance of the political concepts of the nation state," close quote. Now, I hate to say it, but Brzezinski saw this correctly.
Yes, he did. He wrote this 45 years ago.
That's right. We saw it wrongly. America has never understood this clearly. Brzezinski, okay, hats off to Brzezinski for being a very bright guy. He's evil maybe, but bright. He saw this correctly. We missed it. We didn't see it. We didn't see the threat. And so nobody lifted a finger to stop these people, even though we hopped up and down all over the place back in those days. We got my final program, by the way, my big one was with Larry King, believe it or not, on the Mutual Broadcasting Network. I flew back to Washington, D.C. to sit across the table from the executive director of the Trilateral Commission. His name was Charles Heck. I gave him Heck. No, I didn't. But his name was H-E-C-K. He's actually a pretty nice guy. And I sat across the table from him. We're supposed to have a 1-hour interview, like point-counterpoint debate. The show got so hot with call-ins and stuff that Larry King let us go for 3 hours. And Larry is no conservative. He's as liberal as they come. And when the show was done, all he could say, well, he shook his head. He said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And he shook our hands, and we went away. And the next day, I got a call from B. Dalton Booksellers. And they said, I don't know what you said on the radio, but people are wanting your book all over the country. We need to get on this. And I thought to myself, hot diggity dog, we're finally there, and we're going to get some big exposure here. So I sent books off. I expressed them off to B. Dalton headquarters, and I waited a week and nothing, no phone call. I finally called back 10 days later, and they said, well, we've decided we're not going to carry your book after all, but we'll special order it maybe for you.
Nice.
And I said, well, why is that? Well, we started doing some research, and we found out that sure enough, the parent of B. Dalton Booksellers, Dayton Hudson, had a board member who was a member of the Trilateral Commission.
Oh, perfect.
Perfect, right. So they blacklisted us. And not only that, they sent a list around to all their stores saying that the book was out of print and the publisher was out of business. Now, my company was the publisher, the August Corporation, so I knew I had to take my temperature.
Yeah, you were pretty sure you weren't out of business.
Pretty sure I'm still alive. I think this was not, heaven or hell. And so we called several stores and oh, I'm sorry, but the book's out of print, the publisher's out of business. So we were blacklisted, flat out, unadulterated, blacklisted. And so we had fun with it. We went back to some of our radio show contacts and we said, hey, we got a deal for you. We know there's a B. Dalton bookseller right down the street from you. And let's have us back on the air and call them up from the studio and ask them to buy our book. And most of them would say, nobody gets blacklisted in America. Come on, that just doesn't happen here. I said, well, let's just try it. Trust me, let's try it. So they call them up. And they, hello, this is John B. Wells. I'm talking here with Patrick Wood, and I want to order his book, Trilateral's over Washington. And she shuffle, and oh, I'm sorry, sir, but that book is out of print and the publisher is out of business. And they say, well, but I have Patrick Wood on the line, and he's the publisher and the author, and he says he's not out of business, and the book's not out of print.
Click.
The poor girl. I mean, the clerks didn't know. They just had a job, right? They had no clue what was going on in the big scheme.
Well, they did up until the point that they answered the phone. We did
have some fun on that, and it didn't take the blacklist off, but for sure. But it was a scandal of major proportions as far as I'm concerned. That was some handwriting on the wall for me that my life was never going to be easy from that day forward. So, okay, let's just moving forward a little bit here. We got the question comes up then. How did they use the executive branch? If they hijacked it, how did they use it to achieve their objectives? And that's a fair question. I think that's the only question. Well, let's consider the position of the U.S. trade representative. This is the guy that negotiates all the treaties, the trade treaties for the government.
Yes.
And this position has been alive since, I think, 1974, maybe a little before that, but the position has been alive. And since 1976, there have been 12 appointees by the president to the USTR. In other words, there's been 12 different people who have been U.S. trade representatives. These are the guys that negotiated all the trade treaties. Literally, they've NAFTA, CAFTA, the TPP that's being proposed right now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Partnership is coming up. All these treaties are negotiated by these people. They're the lead negotiators, hands down. 12 have been appointed since 1976. 9 of those, John, have been members of the Trilateral Commission. 9.
Another coincidence.
Including the current USTR, Michael Froman, who's negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So looking back over the years, you've had people like Robert Strauss, Reuben Askew, William Brock from 81 to 85 under Reagan. You had Carla Hills under Bush from 89 to 93, Mickey Cantor under Carter, Charlene Barshevsky under Jimmy Carter, not under Carter, under Clinton. Robert Zellick came in under George Bush Jr., Susan Schwab, Michael Froman, and the other 3 appointees. That's not to say that they were, they're not trilaterals, they must be good. They carried on the same policy, essentially. But 9 out of 12, for crying out loud, is just a little bit beyond coincidences, don't you think?
Yes, far beyond it.
This is one of the reasons they needed to have control over the executive branch, was to be able to appoint the USTR. Now, here's another stunning revelation. The President of the United States also has the protocol to appoint presidents of the World Bank. The International Monetary Fund head is appointed by Europeans. The World Bank, I don't know, when they set this up originally, way back, this is the way it was, and it's been this way ever since. So our president appoints the World Bank president. There's no vote on it at all. But there have been 8 World Bank presidents since 1960, well, actually, since 1968. 6 of the 8 have been members of the Trilateral Commission. 6 of the 8. The World Bank is the most important engine of globalization in the history of the world. Without the World Bank, there would be no globalization today.
Patrick, where do they source these people? How do they qualify them?
They qualify them by being team players. That's a good question. This is not like the CFR has a membership application. You could join the CFR if you wanted. You could fill out an application they have, and you could send it in to them, and they would look at it and scrutinize it. Of course, you probably couldn't get in, but maybe you could. But a lot of people get in, and it's an application. You're welcome and free to apply, even if you get rejected. But there's 3,500 people, members of the CFR, that haven't gotten rejected, and there they are. They go to the meetings. They're free to go to the meetings. Some do, some don't. But the Trilateral Commission has always selected its members with an executive board, or an executive search committee, if you will. And in the early days, that included David Rockefeller and Brzezinski. They were both on it, and I think 4 or 5 other people. They would independently determine who they wanted to tap for membership. So it came from their cronies, for one. I mean, they had to somehow know these people a little bit about them somewhere to know that they wanted to tap them. But the process was much like a fraternity at college. And when you go to Rush Week, when you're a freshman, and you go to the Pledge Week, or the Rush Week they call it, where you go to parties and you kind of hint, I hope that I can get into such and such a fraternity or a sorority. But you can't go and ask, at least back when I went to college, you couldn't. You had to wait for somebody to come up and tap you on the shoulder, and they would observe you at the party to see it. They'd talk to you. They'd see, if you got drunk, made a fool of yourself. I don't know what they did, but they would look for the cool people that they wanted to be part of their fraternity. And then they would come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, come with me. And then you would go through a candidating process. We want you to be a member of our fraternity. That's the way these guys did. They went out and tapped people, say, hey, come over here. We want to talk to you about being a member of the Trilateral Commission. And that's how people got in. And that's how people get in today. Every member that belongs to this group was selected in this way.
Unbelievable. You know, Patrick Wood, I got to tell you, I got it wrong.